Now with the composition I've decided to work with, I'm going to begin with a viewfinder. I've mentioned this in a few of the past DVDs I've put together. All you do is you take a piece of basic like notebook paper. This is like one of those small notebook pads. Cut out a sheet, fold the sheet in half and just cut out a little rectangle, and then you get like a nice little window frame. And this allows you to decide, by looking through it, decide what area you want to crop out and frame. Now with respect to this painting, since it's an 8 by 8 inch, I want to work quite large and not deal with the glass vase. I want to focus in on the rose forms, because that's really what people want to see how to paint, how to actually paint these rose forms. And so for the most part, I'm going to include this rose right here, the central rose with all of the light and shadow in it, and then the one part of the one back here to the left, and then perhaps a tiny section of the rose over on the right, and just let the forms run off. Okay, during the first phase, we're going to focus in on the basic composition and those light and dark patterns. Now, you've seen me in the past during this phase work with predominantly burnt umber and some ultramarine blue, but since the base color of this red rose is red, I'm going to work with red and a little bit of alizarin crimson to establish the base form, that basic contour form that acts as the foundation for all of the other elements that will go on top. And you'll notice during this first initial phase, I really do focus on the relationship of the contour, the curve of the rose to what's around it to get that characteristic shape. So as I'm blocking out the surrounding space, I think about allowing the ground to burn through. I don't usually get overly heavy too soon. So there's a lot of that ground coming through right now. It's almost like watercolor. You can see this drip coming down through there. That's fine. I'm more concerned getting a feel for the gesture of the rose, the way it falls on the canvas, on the panel. So we have that, and this comes down like that, and then I'm looking at like the relationship of what's up here, this particular rose, and the way it sort of just gracefully connects itself to the central one right here. You have some foundation shapes set up, got the basic composition all put together. Now I'm going to move in and get more specific with some of the petals and move into considering the accents opposite the light source. Now there's quite a few of them. For the most part, I have I'm going to use a number 2 brush and go in with some ultramarine blue and alizarin crimson and just carve out some of the dark crevices within the base forms. I've got my number 2 bristle brush here, and I'm going to quickly dip down into my ultramarine and allow some of that ultramarine to mix in with the base color I had there. So it's a darker violet. Ultramarine mixed in with the quinacridone and the alizarin crimson I had already there from earlier on. And I'll use this to superimpose on top. Got this dark that cuts across here. You don't want to get too thick with your darks. So there's that, and there's going to be a petal here. And there'll be one that comes around like this. Very transparent still. So you're basically drawing into the base forms. So we have that, and the way that curves up to here. Then you sort of look at the way the petals layer and integrate together. So I'm looking where all the darks are. So there's a dark here. So at this point where I'm using the umber, it's very transparent. I'm just scrubbing and scumbling on top, and in reality, some of the ground is actually peeking through. That warm raw sienna is burning through all of the umbers I'm putting down. So we have this spot of red right here, and it gathers towards the edge. Allow it to gather towards the edge. So what I mean by that is like right up there, that's where the petal sort of emerges outward. And then there's another spot of red. So the trick is to not allow the red to go down into the dark. And then there's some light up in here, little spots of light that poke through. At this point, I'm going to move in with a number 4 brush to reestablish some of the background spots, some of the trap shapes in between the roses and up here, just to move the tonalities around, allow the eye to flow. And also, as I do it, you'll notice that I'll do what's called an overbrush, where I'll overlap on top of the edge to sort of slowly begin to soften some of the edges on the rose forms. A tint of blue, and then perhaps a tiny amount of yellow ochre, just to green it a little bit. Now we're going to paint into the gray violet with this, just to vary the background and restate some of the areas. This intermixes wonderfully with what's underneath, and the gray blue definitely complements what's there, and it allows the temperature to move around. Down here we've got this gray blue, gray, green, and allowing some of this to move up top interacts wonderfully with what's below. So painting right in with, for the most part, a modular stroke. And here's a case where I can sort of overpaint this edge, sort of soften that edge, and allow some of the paint above and below to sort of merge together. And that gives it more of a softer, shimmering quality, so the roses aren't so harsh. And that's what I'm going to be working towards. I want to work towards softening some of the forms. Then obviously there's certain areas that need to remain sharp. And down here. moving down into the light. In this case, I'm adding a small amount of green. Basically, I'm taking some of the green from the leaves and moving it up into the negative space. I tend to work towards moving color around in small amounts. Not to an extent where it's blatant, just enough to allow the eye to flow and keep things harmonious. And down below we have all these wonderful small trap shapes where I can paint in between. It's almost like painting the sky through branches of a tree. And by doing this, by painting the little missing pieces, that allows you to refine what's on either side. Like, for example, this stem right here I can paint on the left, on the right, and thin it out and give it more of a feeling of sensitivity. Soften that edge. And this edge just sort of cuts in a little bit more, so I can paint right through. So by taking the brush, like down here in the shadow, I can sort of push down on the paint just to soften it and move from area to area. Like this dark is rather harsh. I can press down, sort of soften. And over here, and like under here, I can actually use some strokes. Just come across the surface, sort of model it. So I am. This is a sensitive point in the painting. I mean, I am in some cases refining secondary planes. So it's just by pressing. The other technique that can be used is taking the brush and sort of just lightly coming across the form, just sort of getting the paint, like right here in this dark, where the dark is harsh, I can push down and come up, sort of scumble it up, then come down, and actually blend that area together. Come around the form and come right here down to get it to have more of an atmospheric quality down there. So I've got the same brush. This is a number 4 synthetic. And what I'm doing is basically doing the same thing I did with the small one and sort of pushing down, patting down across, like this area down here, the entire form from the light across the accent to get a bit of an atmospheric feel down on the shadow, just to soften. Some of these edges are slightly overstated. I want to get the eye to flow towards this form here. And I could do the same thing right here, like down here with a larger brush, just sort of push down. As I do it, I'm squinting at the form, looking for ways to sort of integrate and simplify. Perhaps come across like this, and then back here. In this case, I'm holding the brush out a little bit further. Just sort of feathering the back